Hi, my name is Larry Donahue, and I'm one of the principals at Law for Small Business. And we do a lot of anonymous LLCs. This is about anonymous LLCs. So, what is an anonymous LLC? An anonymous LLC is simply an LLC that doesn't disclose ownership information on the internet. That's all it is. It's not a mechanism that would allow you to avoid taxes. It's not a mechanism that would allow you to avoid the long arm of the law. It's not a mechanism that will allow you to do business and not be discovered or sued. It's not that. All it does is protect the owner's names from being displayed on the internet. That's it. And truth be told, there really is no such thing as an anonymous LLC. It's not a legal thing. It's just a concept that we use to describe an LLC that doesn't disclose ownership information. That's it. So an anonymous LLC is only possible in certain states that don't require disclosure of ownership information. Three popular states are Delaware, Wyoming, and New Mexico. They each have their advantages and disadvantages, and they allow the creation of an LLC without disclosing ownership information. If you're in Texas, Florida, New York, California, sorry, you're out of luck. Those states require disclosure. Now we have an answer for you, however, and I'll explain that in a minute. But you can't get a Texas LLC and not disclose ownership information. So let me explain the anonymous LLC first for New Mexico, Wyoming, Delaware residents, and then we'll apply this to other states. So if you're in one of those three states, what we would do is set up an LLC for you, and we, the law firm, will act as your organizer, and we will also be your registered agent. That means our name is associated with your LLC, not as an owner, but as the registered agent only and as the organizer. And then my firm prepares all the paperwork that you need to be able to open up bank accounts and stuff like that. There's one other caveat or gotcha, and that is each LLC needs a physical mailing address. And that's your address, not ours. A lot of competition on the internet will offer to do this kind of thing for you, and they'll tell you, oh, you can use the registered agent address as the mailing address. The truth of the matter is the Secretary of State's office, no matter what state you're in, doesn't care. They don't do address validations. So they're going to take whatever address get put on the forms. The problem is if the LLC ever gets sued, a strong plaintiff's attorney is going to quickly see that the physical mailing address of the company is the same as the registered agent's address. And then if they find out that you don't own the registered agent address and the registered agent is not you, they're going to use that as an excuse to pierce the corporate veil because you put fraudulent information down on the registration filings. So that's why we don't do that, although a lot of our competition does. What we recommend is that you get a UPS box that will give you a street address, or my firm provides a virtual mailbox service. And it's kind of like a street address. The physical mailing address cannot be a P.O. box, but it can be located anywhere in the world. It just needs to be a street address. So local UPS store works well for a lot of people, or our virtual mailbox service. It is an additional cost, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a limited liability company, and liability protection is part of the package. Why would you go and destroy the liability protection by making a simple mistake like that, by tying the registered agent address to the physical mailing address? So, back to an anonymous LLC. We're the organizer, we're the registered agent, and you need a physical mailing address. That's all you need. The LLCs can be owned by individuals, they can be owned by foreign nationals, and they can be owned by other companies. LLCs are very flexible entities for doing business. Now, let's talk about your state. So let's say you're a Texas or California, Florida, New York resident, and you want to do business anonymously. You can, but there's an issue here. And the issue is, are you transacting business in the state? Now, I am not a Texas or Florida, California, New York lawyer, so I can't tell you what is or isn't transacting business in those states. What I can do is give you some general rules. If you have an employee in the state tends to think you're doing business in the state. If you have a base of operations, you're doing business in the state. If you have a retail location where people are, members of the public are coming and going, you're doing business in the state. So it's not just where your customer is necessarily. It's, do you have any kind of business method or process or operations in that state? Now, if you're a lucky one in California, and I love California, by the way, beautiful state, but I got to tell you, their laws are very broad. And the chances are is if you're a resident of California and you have a business, it's probably doing business in the state. And the reason for that is there's two rules in California that seem to net in just about everybody. And one of them is 25% or more of the revenue of a company coming in to a resident of California. If so, you're doing business in California. Likewise, if 25% or more of the company is owned by a California resident, you're doing business in California. So if you're in California, just assume whatever business you're doing is probably doing business in California. So back to anonymous LLCs and doing business anonymously. If you are transacting business in the state wants to know about it, pure and simple. And there's two ways to tell the state you're doing business in the state. One is to register a company in the state. So if you're in Texas, forming a Texas LLC. Now the problem with that is we have to indicate who owns the company in Texas. Another way is to file an anonymous LLC as a foreign LLC in the state. So back to the Texas example. If you had a New Mexico anonymous LLC, you can register it in Texas as a foreign LLC in Texas. It's not creating a new LLC. It's simply taking the New Mexico LLC and telling Texas, the state of Texas, that this New Mexico LLC is doing business in Texas. Problem with that is the state still wants to know who owns the company. So either solution still discloses ownership information. So you think about that for a minute, and I think some of you probably figured out the answer. The answer is you personally don't own the Texas company, or you don't own the New Mexico Anonymous LLC directly that is going to be registered in Texas. The answer is whatever entity is going to be registered in your state is not owned by you, but it's owned by a second company, an anonymous parent. So you have the Texas or New York or Florida, whatever LLC in whatever state you're in, formed, and it's owned by an anonymous company, an anonymous parent, and you own the parent. So what that means is we have to disclose ownership information down here at the state, and we say this other company owns it. And then this company is an anonymous company, so when somebody looks up this company here, they don't know ownership. They can't find out the ownership. And that's how we preserve anonymity no matter what state you're in. The problem is you're having to, invest in two companies. Your local LLC and then the parent anonymous LLC. A little bit of a pain in the butt, but it's not a major big deal. So let me, the next question I usually get when I get to this part is taxes. How does that even work? So let me explain. The child LLC is solely owned by the parent anonymous LLC. What that means is this company can be disregarded for tax purposes, and its profits and losses flow up to the parent. So for all intents and purposes, this company doesn't exist for tax purposes. The anonymous company does. So now we have to look at the anonymous company and what's going on here for tax purposes. So before I give you an answer here, it's a little complicated, and I'm sorry, it's the IRS. So LLCs can be taxed in one of 4 different ways. They can be have disregarded tax status. That means, as I mentioned down here, it doesn't exist for tax purposes. Its profits and losses flow up to the parent. Then there's, that's called pass-through, by the way. It's a pass-through entity. There's 2 more pass-through options, by the way. One is partnership. The company issues K-1s to the owners, and the profits and losses flow through to the owners. There's another one, Subchapter S. You might have heard of an S-Corporation. It's the exact same thing. It's an S-Corporation, or it's taxed as an S-Corporation, even though it's an LLC. So I like to say Subchapter S. Again, K-1s are issued, profits and losses flow through to the owners. Finally, there's one last tax status that's not pass-through. That's considered Subchapter C, like a C corporation. What this means is it's taxed as its own person. The profits and losses do not flow through to the owners. And that's good for when you don't want to increase your personal income for one reason or another. So back to this example here. The local LLC is disregarded. Now we look at the parent LLC. What is its tax status? If it's pass-through, meaning you're the only owner and it's disregarded, or you have 1 or more partners and you choose a partnership or Subchapter S, then its profits and losses flow through to the individual owners. So let's use our Texas example. Texas LLC, disregarded. New Mexico LLC, let's say it has 2 partners, 1 person in Texas, 1 person in New Mexico. The K-1s of the profits and losses go to the individual tax forms. So the guy or gal in Texas is paying Texas taxes for their LLC, as well as the guy in New Mexico or gal in New Mexico. What that means is we don't really care if New Mexico has corporate income tax, do we? Because the state of New Mexico is not charging income tax on the company. The profits and losses are flowing to the owners where taxes are charged. So Delaware and Wyoming do not have corporate income tax. New Mexico does. If we have a pass-through entity, we don't care about any of that. If, however, you want to do C-Corp or Subchapter C for taxes, then we do care. So for anonymous LLCs, the general rule is if you care about pass-through tax, let me rephrase that. If you care about corporate income tax because you do not have a pass-through entity, then you probably want to file and create an anonymous LLC in Wyoming. If you don't care about corporate income tax because you have a pass-through entity, then you probably want to file in New Mexico. And why didn't I say Delaware? The reason being is Delaware is under a lot of pressure by the feds to change their ways about anonymous LLCs, and we are expecting them to change their laws at some point. Truth be told, I've been saying that for about a year and they haven't changed, but I still feel strongly that they will at some point. And then that's going to leave people scrambling. Now, what's the difference between Wyoming and New Mexico? Well, Wyoming, no corporate income tax. That's a good thing. The disadvantage is there's annual reports, and you have to pay fees on those annual reports. So it's a kind of a pain in the butt. New Mexico doesn't have that. New Mexico has no fees, no annual reports. You don't have to deal with any of that. And New Mexico tends to be a bit of the Wild West a little bit, and so the laws are very business friendly. So we tend to push people to New Mexico with anonymous LLCs unless we have the corporate income tax issue. Then we'll push them to Wyoming. So that's the general tax issue, and that also hopefully gives you a good sense of how you can do an anonymous LLC even though you may not be in a state that supports it. Now, if you're in one of these other states, let's say Texas or Florida, New York, where you're not transacting business in the state. Now, California, remember what I said earlier, you're probably transacting business in the state, so I don't think the following applies to you. But if you're in Texas or Tennessee or Alaska or any of these other states, if you have an internet business, an online internet business, and you have no operations in your state whatsoever, you're doing drop ship with Arizona for Amazon, for example. Again, I'm not a lawyer in these other states, but generally speaking, it's my understanding you're not transacting business in those states. I would advise you to consult a professional in your state, either a local business lawyer or a CPA, and tell them what you're doing and see what their opinion is on transacting business in the state. If you're not transacting business in the state, then you don't need to do this parent nonsense. You just form an anonymous LLC. It's the one that owns your business, and you're good to go. So you just form an anonymous LLC and protect yourself. So let me talk about a couple of other things real quick. I'm going to talk about banking and then anonymity in general. On the banking side, just because you form an anonymous LLC in New Mexico or Wyoming and you happen to be in Kentucky, doesn't mean you have to have a bank account in Wyoming or New Mexico. You can have a bank account anywhere. That doesn't matter. What matters is that when you go into the bank, you have to provide the right documents. You need to provide the articles that we would provide you. You need to provide an operating agreement, which again, we provide you. It shows who owns the company. And then you need an FEIN. And so let me explain that briefly. FEIN is like an EIN. It's the same thing. Federal Employee Identification Number. It's issued by the IRS. The IRS requires what's called a responsible party to apply for the FEIN. And the IRS wants to know the Social Security number of that responsible party. You have two options. You have either a owner, or you have somebody who controls the company to be a responsible party. You cannot hire a nominee or somebody else that doesn't own or control the company and get the FEIN. And I want to warn you quickly, some of our competition out there will provide nominee services. Very risky and very dangerous for a lot of reasons. And the word nominee is actually used by the IRS. You can look up the definition of nominee, and it's not what our competition is saying they're willing to do. It's very risky for them as well as you. That's why we won't do that. So it would be you or somebody that's affiliated with a company as the responsible party for the FEIN. What does that mean? That means you're not anonymous to the IRS. The IRS is going to know who you are, but it's supposed to be private. So that information should not be on the internet. The reason I say it should, because it's the IRS. Who knows if they get hacked? You do have that risk. On the banks, the LLC will own the bank account. It's going to be the LLC's bank account. But if you're a signer, the banks have federal requirements to know who is banking with them. So they're going to want to know about your information as a signer, not an owner. Again, the banks are supposed to keep that confidential, so you should be okay there. Finally, let's just talk about anonymity quickly. A lot of our clients have heart-wrenching stories about why they want anonymous companies. We have a number of abuse victims who have literally gone underground to escape their abusers, and they have unique businesses that they want to continue to support, but they don't want their former abuser to look them up and find out where they're at. We have property owners who have other companies or people providing management services, and what they don't want are tenants to find out who they are to try and go around the property manager and potentially harass them. We also have lots of business owners who are in unique business circumstances, whatever it is, and they don't want to be harassed. I had a client out of Texas who formed a number of LLCs with me, and the reason he did that is he had I don't remember the exact company, but it was like a construction company. It seemed like not a big deal, except he had a crazy client who started threatening his family on Facebook and social media. And he basically said, never again. I'm gonna maintain anonymity, and I'm gonna at least protect my family. Finally, it seems like a big segment of anonymous business owners are people who are afraid of either former employers or the competition from figuring out what it is they're doing, or more importantly, who's managing whatever company or owns whatever company that they're working on. So what they're trying to do is, it's really a form of trying to prevent competitive intelligence from diving too deep into a particular company. And all of these things are legitimate reasons to have an anonymous company. But what won't work is trying to avoid taxes or not paying taxes, or trying to have a criminal company of some sort. So you need to be aware. I'm a lawyer, and when you do business with us, you have attorney-client privilege and confidentiality with us. That's more than you're going to get with the non-lawyers on the internet. What does that mean? Well, if we're subpoenaed by some organization or entity that doesn't have power over us, we're probably not going to respond to it. And if they do have power over us, and that would be a state where we're located or the feds, we will have to respond to it. But we will also assert our privilege, and we will also be able to contact you so that you can hire local counsel, so that your local counsel can try to assert our privilege of attorney-client confidentiality and privilege. But it's not absolute. Courts generally will force us to submit information if they have jurisdiction over us, and we will probably have to do it, but not in all cases. It's a very complex area of law, and we try to do our best in every given situation. But the point being is that if you're thinking of a criminal enterprise, please just go elsewhere. We are busy enough as it is trying to protect our clients, and we don't need to deal with that nonsense, and it's not going to help you. The subpoena power of the proper court is going to find out what we know, and it's not going to help you out at all. Finally, anonymity is not absolute. And I'm going to give you two examples of clients who had their anonymity destroyed. It had nothing to do with us. The information wasn't available on the Secretary of State's website, but various circumstances created problems for them. One example was a client had a family member congratulate them on LinkedIn with their business. So one quick little message on LinkedIn destroyed all the anonymity and tied the individual to his anonymous company. The other one that comes to mind is a client who used an old domain name from a previous business and started using it for his new anonymous company. And what happened was the who is information, that domain name, had his contact information on it. So it immediately tied his anonymous company to the old information on his domain name, destroying his anonymity. So the point I'm trying to make with all of this is it's not an absolute thing. It requires diligence on your part to be careful who and how you release information to. But what I will tell you is, if you think about anonymity in the short term and work underneath the anonymous umbrella, it will pay dividends in the long run, because it'll help minimize exposure to you personally as well as your family. And a lot of people will use anonymous companies either as holding companies for other businesses or just for whatever business that they're in. I'll tell you too, anonymous companies don't work well for professionals. Like myself, lawyers, we have professional licensures, and our boards, whether you're a doctor or maybe a contractor, a psychologist, they're going to therapists, that information is going to get exposed on the internet in other ways. So it's really for people who have private businesses, and you want to help protect yourself and or your family's identity as it is associated with that company. So I appreciate your time in watching this video. My name again was Larry Donahue with Law for Small Business. You can reach us by going to our website at www.l, as in law, the number 4, sb.com/contact, or you can call us at 505-715-5700. If you have any questions, please call us or email us or contact us at the contact form, and we'd be happy to answer more questions and see if an anonymous LLC is the right thing for you. Thank you. Goodbye.